Thank you, Mark, and a big hello from London. A massive amount of data to go through today, as not only did we have a lot of weekly technical patterns last week to digest, but yesterday was the end of June, and we have a lot of monthly technical patterns to look at for June as well. So with no further delay, there was a strong dilemma in last week's patterns. You see, we had weekly key reversals up in the UK FTSE futures and in the Dow Jones index of the US. But we also had weekly key reversals down this time in the E-mini S&P futures, the Nasdaq 100 index and the Philex semiconductor index, all in the US. Additionally, we had weekly key reversals down in the Chinese CSI A50 stock index, the Shanghai Composite Index and the Hermes Index in Egypt, plus a weekly key reversal down in one of the darlings of the TikTok world. A weekly key reversal down in AMC stock. To complement these weekly key reversals down, we also had weekly key reversals up in US T-note and T-bond futures and in German Bund futures. So overall, a very contradictory picture last week. So what have we seen this week as the market tries and sorts out this messy situation? Well, all of the stock and stock related patterns, with the exception of the UK FTSE futures and AMC stock, all of them have moves higher this week. Thus, most were reactionary moves higher apart from the Dow Jones index, which was the leader. The UK FTSE futures tried higher but came off, and AMC, well, it just came off. As for the fixed income futures in both US and Germany, well, they all had reactionary moves lower this week. I will not mention the World Cup at this time. There was one other main category that showed up last week, and that was weekly key reversals up in both New York sugar and London sugar futures, which both had weekly key reversals up last week. The London one was especially interesting, as this was an immediate countering weekly key reversal up last week, after the previous week had a weekly key reversal down. Now, I had warned something like this might happen to London sugar last week, and so it did. This week, both London and New York sugar futures have had excellent follow-on moves higher to last week's actions. We also had an interesting weekly key reversal down in EX butter futures last week. On its own, it was worth mentioning, but it becomes more interesting when I speak about the monthly key reversals shortly. There was also a monthly key reversal down last week in the Baltic Dirty Tanker Index, which this week is starting to have a small follow-on lower, with the lowest level since late February. This just leaves the currencies, and there was a strong lack of interest in weekly patterns there, which was not surprising given the move seen in the previous week. We had weekly key reversals up in US dollar Turkish lira, which had an unsurprising follow-on higher this week, and a weekly key reversal up in euro against Romanian lei last week, which to be honest hasn't seen any sort of move this week, being both above and below last Friday's close, and still well within last week's range. That just about covers the weekly patterns seen last week. Now let's look at the monthly patterns for June, of which there are quite a lot, with some especially interesting ones in the commodities. However, I'll start with the currencies. And there are not any mainline currency pairs, but quite a few smaller currency pairings with a continuing theme of a stronger dollar seen 2 weeks ago in some of the major currencies when they had weekly key reversals. So we had monthly key reversals down in the Kiwi dollar against the US dollar and the Aussie dollar against the Japanese yen. Both of these have had reactionary moves back up this week, which is not necessarily that negative, as a monthly key reversal up is a much longer term pattern and may not have any immediate follow-on moves. We also had monthly key reversals up in US dollar Mexican peso, which is really interesting, as prices have been trying lower since mid-April, and this might be the respite this pairing needs. We also had monthly key reversals up in US dollar Israeli shekel, euro against the Swedish krona, euro against the Polish zloty, US dollar against the Polish zloty, US dollar against Hungarian forint, and US dollar against the Chilean peso. All of these, apart from the US dollar Israeli shekel, have seen the start of higher moves, or else continuation of moves higher already in operation. Only the US dollar Israeli shekel has had a somewhat reactionary move lower, And I put that down to the presence of the medium moving average immediately overhead, currently at 30072. Now, there were no monthly patterns in the fixed income markets I followed, but we did have some interesting coincidence in stock markets where both the Chinese CSI 300 stock index and the Shinex composite index in China both had monthly key reversals up in June. Both of these look very interesting as they are close to highs made last week. Highs not seen since December 2021 in the case of the CSI 300 and not ever seen at all in the case of the Shinex. So a very interesting situation. I come now to the commodities, and there are three distinct groupings with different but very interesting characteristics. The first is in coffee, where we had monthly key reversals up in both New York and London coffee futures. I cautioned about this pair on Monday of this week, as New York coffee futures had a pretty good reverse head and shoulder pattern that was about to play out higher, and London coffee futures were about already set up for such a monthly key reversal. Next is the metals, and we had monthly key reversals down in LME 3-month aluminium and also LME 3-month lead. Aluminium was not really a surprise, as this monthly move down was part of a larger bump and run reversal top originating from November last year, and one that might still have some way to go lower, despite support congestion now building up underneath the market. Lead, on the other hand, is part of a far older pattern. You see, I pointed out at the end of 2024 that lead had made one of the rarest of patterns, an annual key reversal down for 2024. And I've repeatedly said for over a year and a half that all things in LME 3-month lead should be seen in the shadow of that big long-term pattern. June's monthly key reversal down is just the latest manifestation of this shadow. We next come to a triplet of commodities, ones that seemingly endorse each other. You see, we had monthly key reversals down in Chicago soybean oil futures, in Paris rapeseed futures, and also in ICE Winnipeg canola futures. Chicago soybean oil futures move lower is a follow-on in part to a double top formed over May and June, plus, and this one took its own sweet time in showing itself, plus we had an annual key reversal down in Chicago soybean oil futures last year, an immediate countering one. And we have seen prices rise for the first 6 months of this year, enough that I started to wonder about this longer term pattern. Well, it seems to have shown up now, just when many have thought it was over. Paris rapeseed futures are a break lower from a pattern originating in February, but it still might have a question mark over it. And ICE Winnipeg canola futures, well, that is a break lower from a more recent April to May based pattern, though it has now dropped down to congestion seen between March and April. I finally come to perhaps the strangest but perhaps most interesting pairing, and that is in dairy futures, specifically butter futures. You see, we have had a monthly key reversal down in EX butter futures in Europe. Not a great pattern, and coming as it does at the flattish piece on the lows since December last year, but it is a monthly key reversal down, and with the lowest prices since February 2021. At the same time, we have had a monthly key reversal up, yes, up, in CME butter futures in the States. This monthly pattern coming as it does, based on the lows seen in May, but above those seen in January. This is a strange situation, and one I feel obliged to report and for you to consider, as I will do over the coming weeks. I just hope you are as bemused by the situation as I am. As always, I'm happy to answer any direct questions with anyone who's interested. With that, I'll finish this section from London, and I hope that you found these comments useful. Thank you for watching and listening. This weekly broadcast gives the essential market patterns and consequences. Please be aware of the risk disclaimer posted both at the front and at the back of this broadcast. Copyright is Eddie Tofpick and ADM Investor Services International Limited. And here comes the final important bit.